Hi everyone, welcome back to GameMaker Cast. It's Mickey, and in today's lesson we have quite a few things that we're going to cover. First, I want to get a new system up to handle our players' animations, and then I want to introduce a ducking mechanism. Now sadly we're going to have to implement a new tile system. Should you remember how to do this, take a few minutes and use the Tileset new found in the Patreon link in the description. If you can't remember how to do that, you can quickly follow along. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new sprite underneath Tilesets, called spr_tileset_new. And what I want to do is import the sprite that I have. So I'll just say import and use Tileset new. And you can see that right now our Tileset has a whole bunch of spaces in it. So let's edit that. And then let's go to auto trim. And now we can close that. And the only thing we need to do is add 16 pixels onto our canvas size here. So the easiest thing, if you're not good at math, is 208 plus 16. It's going to equal 224. And you want to make sure that you anchor it to the right. So once we hit apply, if we zoom in, you can see that now we have the blank space that is required by GameMaker. The next thing I need to do is create a new tile set. Let's call this ts_new. And I'm going to select the sprite, and we're going to be using the Tileset new. Now what we want to do is just kind of zoom in to make sure that all of our tiles are matching up correctly, and they are definitely matching up. Now the one thing that I didn't cover before, and maybe it's something we should look at quickly, is just the brush builder. It quickly allows us to build out certain brushes. So let's say we were working on a corner, we could have something like this if I choose the correct one. So that could be one corner. We could have another corner where it comes in on the side. Let's do the, actually we should probably, let's do this properly. So we'll have one up here. Again, you don't have to do this, but this is just going to, I think, speed up making the room. And I'm making sure that they're not touching because these are going to be 4 separate brushes. Okay, so with that done, let's close that. And now let's go to our room. And we're going to leave kind of the stuff in here, but we will create a new Tileset layer. We'll just call this ts_new. And obviously for this layer, what we need to do is select our Tileset. And now we kind of just draw over it. So if you remember, we set up these brushes here, so I can quickly grab this brush and just come up to the top, and I could paste that in. And you know what, I can rotate this, so I didn't actually need to make those 4 brushes, but that's fine. Now I just need to build up the sides here. So I'll grab that guy, and let's see if I can be nice and steady with the mouse. And I'll go all the way up here, and then all the way down here. And finally on the side, and last but not least, the bottom. Alright. So we're done that here. Let's make a couple more adjustments. We need something so our player can duck underneath. So I'm just going to have this wall go up. We'll be using almost the same collision. We'll just move it around a little bit. And I'm going to take the corners that I have and put them in. Now let's make this little platform here, and let's actually make it so that we can jump down from one side. And we'll grab the top here and the bottom. And now we need, let's not go to anything too crazy. Let's just make a long platform here. And we'll go up to the top, grab our corners. And with that, let's make sure we turn off our default, and let's turn off the collisions. We'll drag it down into here, and let's make a new instance. We'll call it collisions_new. And all we want to do is go to our resources and start dragging out this block here. Oops, we need the object, not the sprite. And let's also turn this grid down to 16 by 16, so hopefully we can get directly on our object here. Drag that out. Drag this out as well. So I'm trying to do this as quick as possible. And now we have the side. I'll copy and paste. And copy and paste the side there as well. Okay. Now with that all done, let's hit F5. Let's just make sure that our game works properly again. You can see that we're colliding. We have the jump. And we can't go underneath, but you know what? That is 100% fine because we are going to fix that. And actually, I think what might be happening, yeah, even though we can't see our collision, it's still there. So let's actually delete this layer, and I'm going to delete the default layer as well. Now, if I hit F5, I should be able to go underneath there. It looked like my character could. Definitely can do that. And I don't have any weird issues happening anymore. All right, so with the tile set now done, we can move on to implementing the system that's going to handle our animation. If I bring the folder that I had up, you can see that we have a whole bunch of different animations here, and a lot of these I drew in a third-party program, and what we need to do is import them into GameMaker. So underneath sprites, I'm going to use kind of the tedious method here. We'll create a new group and we will call it player. And what we need to do is we can easily drag and drop a couple of these in there. So let's see. We should be able to get away with dragging the ducking, walking, falling. Let's do jump and walking. So let's take these in and we'll drag and drop them into player. Actually, we can get away with the idle as well. So let's do that. We'll throw it in there. Now the reason we're not doing ducking is because it is a different size. So the do ducking, we'll just say create sprite, boxy ducking, and I believe it's just boxy ducks. And I also want to put SPR in front of that. So I'm going to say edit image, and I'm just going to import the image itself, and it's 64 by 64 with the 4 pixel offset for vertical and horizontal. So when I hit convert, you can see that it comes in just fine. Now the one thing that I do want to do is make sure that these have the bottom center anchor, because we're going to be moving the collision mask up and down depending on if our character is ducking or not. So with each one of these, we want the bottom center, and because this is a single one just like before, we'll edit the image. We'll go image, convert to frames, and use the exact same method that we have. We just basically want to end up with a 64 by 64 image. And then let's change this to boxy underscore idle. And this guy, we'll use the bottom center, SPR boxy falling. We need to make sure that our size is 64 by 64. In our collision mask for the fallen one, we want to make sure that we use the full image, so we grab everything at the bottom as well. Now let's go over to our boxy duck walking. We'll rename it to SPR underscore boxy duck and walking. And just like before, we're going to go through and kind of, we're just going to convert each of these into frames. So if you don't want to stick around for this, I don't blame you. It's a tedious task, but you can skip ahead. I'm just going to continue doing this and making sure that my collision mask is correct. Now the only thing on this one is the ducking one. I want the collision mask to have a space at the top, and that's so we can allow our player to actually duck. Alright, and let's go with the SPR ducking. Once again, edit the image, convert to frames. This time we only have 4 frames. We'll hit convert, make sure our anchor is a bottom center, and let's check our mask. You can see right here that let's actually use the mask so that it is not automatic. We'll do a manual, and we just want to drag this down to there. Next we'll do the walking. We're almost done here. I know this is a painful task. I know that there is also some new things coming through the pipeline to make this a little bit easier. I just saw them on Twitter today, so hopefully that will make things a lot more better for everyone. I'll just check the collision on this one, and finally the jumping one. We'll do image, convert. We have 4 frames, and the bottom center and check our collision mask. Just want to make sure I had bottom center on there. Okay, so with everything done there, we can now start moving on to the code. So the very first thing that I want to do is create a new enumerator. I want to create an enumerator that's going to handle our states. So just like before, we go into our state script and let's create an enumerator for our player animation state. So right underneath the vertical state, let's create a new enumerator. We'll call it player animation state, and let's fix our spelling here. And then inside here, these are going to be the different animations that correspond with the sprites that we just implemented. So let's do idle, walking, jumping, we'll do falling, ducking, and then finally the ducking underscore walk. Now with these states, we're going to have to do the exact same thing as we did with the vertical state. We're going to need a way in our player object to keep track of the state here. So let's go down to our player, and inside the object player, let's open up the create event, and let's go all the way down to the bottom. And right underneath the state vertical, we'll do state animation, and we'll set it to player animation state.idle. And we might as well change the sprite while we're here. Let's change it to the idle sprite. If you can't find it here, you can use this to zoom in and out, or you can just use the search at the bottom to narrow everything down. Now going into the step event, we're going to have to make a state machine like we did with the vertical state, but we're going to have to make it for the animation state. Now I think it's probably best to keep it at the bottom, that way all of our movement code has already happened before it decides what state to show the player in. So let's create a region at the bottom. We'll just call it animation state, and let's end that region for code wise. And now let's do our switch statement, and we want to switch on the state animation. And while we're doing this, we're going to copy and paste a bunch of case statements here. So let's start out with case. The state animation is player animation state.idle. We'll run any code in there, and let's say there's walking, jumping, falling, ducking, and then the duck walking. So let's fill these in with walking, jumping, falling, ducking, then finally the ducking underscore walk. Now let's kind of think about this. When our player is in the idle state, what do we want to happen? There's a couple different things. We don't want any animation, so we can set our image speed to equal 0. And we also need to set the sprite index to the correct sprite, which is our SBR boxy idle. And now let's say we go over to the walking. Well, we kind of want the same thing, but this time we actually just want animation. So let's copy these two lines, and in walking we'll paste them in. We'll say that the sprite can now animate, and change the sprite index instead of idle to walking. So now that we have this, how do we go about changing the state between idle and walking? Let's take a look at our vertical movement here. Or sorry, not our vertical, our horizontal movement. Right here at the bottom, we add the horizontal speed to our X position. What we can do is we can check horizontal speed to see if it's 0, and if it's 0 then we're idle, and if it's not 0 then, well, we can almost assume that we're walking. Here, let's kind of step through it. We can say if the horizontal speed does not equal 0, so this means that we are moving. However, if our vertical speed equals 0, then we know that we are walking because we're not jumping or anything like that. So we'll say not jumping, and now we can set our state animation to equal the player animation state.walking. However, if our horizontal speed equals 0 and our vertical speed equals 0, meaning once again we are not jumping, then our state animation is going to be player animation state.idle. Okay, so just to quickly go over this one more time, if we have a horizontal speed, meaning we're moving left and right, and our vertical speed is 0, meaning that we are on the ground, we're not falling or jumping, then we can set the state to walking. If we do not have a horizontal speed, we'll come down to the else statement. We need to make sure that, once again, we are standing still, meaning we are not jumping or falling. And if that is true, then we'll come in and set the idle state. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work, so let's hit F5 and let's see what we get here. We only have the 2 states hooked up, but let's see. We should have an idle animation, which is a standing still, and when we move left and right, our guy is now walking. And when we stop moving, he stops walking. Perfect. So let's go ahead and implement the rest of the states here. So down here at the bottom, we have jumping, falling, ducking, and walking. We can take a copy of these 2 lines here because they're pretty much all we're going to use. While we have ducking, actually let's do jumping. We'll do jumping first. The jumping is an animated sprite, so we'll set the speed to 1, and then we want to set our sprite to SPR boxy jumping, if it fills in here. Actually, did I not implement that? Yeah, I named that wrong. SPR boxy jumping, that's why it's not showing up. Alright. And now in the falling state, our falling state is also animated, and we want the falling animation. And while we are ducking, our animation is 0 because it's a single sprite, and then we just use the ducking animation, or sorry, ducking sprite. And while we're walking, it is also animated, so we'll say that is 0, and we want to refer to the duck_walking sprite. Now, even though that we have this done now, we still don't have a way to transition to each one of these different states. We've done the idle and walking, but let's go through and let's kind of figure out what we need for jumping, falling, and then we'll come back to ducking because they're going to be a special case. If we open up the vertical state in our case statement here, we have a couple things that we can use. Right here, we're checking to see if the player is falling, so we can change the animation right underneath here. We could just say state animation equals player animation state dot falling, and I'm going to copy this line because right here when we press the jump key, we know that a vertical state is jumping, so we might as well change the player animation state to jumping as well. If we scroll down a little bit further into the jump and falling vertical state, you can see right here is where we transition to the falling element. So let's also change our animation to the falling. And if our vertical speed is 0 and the player state is falling, then we have to set it to on ground. So here we could set our animation to idle, meaning that we are once again standing still. And I think that might be it for those 2 states. Let's hit F5 and see how we've done. So we know that we have walking and we have jumping, and you can see that the falling is working there. Now the jump frame is a little hard to see, but if I keep going up the wall, you can see that his feet are moving. And you can also see that the falling state is working as well, as his feet are moving just a little bit as he falls. Now let's switch over to the ducking. So the ducking is going to be a little bit different because we just can't really change the sprite and consider it to be ducking, because what can happen, actually let me run the game again, is while we're coming in here, let's say we want to duck underneath here, well, we could press the down arrow and duck, and if I let go of down and my player is directly in the middle, we're going to have some sort of check to say no, our player can't stand up there. They're going to have to move left or right, or basically out of this zone before they can stand up. So what we're going to do in the create statement, right underneath let's do the facing here, we're going to create a new variable, and this was just going to be called was ducking, and we'll set it default. So this will tell us if the player was ducking or not. So this is just something we can quickly check to see if the player has ducked. Now, earlier in the series, we set our key down to S, so we'll keep that the same. And in the step event, right before our animation state and our vertical movement, let's create a new region, And this one will just be called ducking. So we'll end that region. So in here is where we're going to have all of our ducking code. So the first thing we want to do is check to see if the keyboard is down. So keyboard check, and the key that we're looking for is key down. So meaning that I am holding the S key down. If the S key is down, we want to check our horizontal speed to make sure that it does not equal 0, because we have a duck and then we can walk as well. So let's say if the horizontal speed does not equal 0, then we know that we are moving. And if our vertical speed is set to 0, vertical speed equals 0, then we know that we are not jumping or falling. So this means that we can say our state animation equals player animation state dot duck walking. Because we are moving left and right, we are ducking and walking at the same time. Now we are also going to have to set that flag was ducking equal to true. Now on the flip side, if we are pressing the down key and our horizontal speed equals 0, then we can say our animation state is going to be just the ducking state. So that's just us pressing the down key. And now that will handle the state of ducking. So let's actually give this a try to make sure our animation is correct. There's just one more thing we need to do. So let's hit the down, and you can see that nothing is working. Okay, so when I walk left and right, that is working, but the down key itself is not working. So let's quickly move on here. Let's first check our animations. We have player animation ducking. So let's go down here, and the ducking equals a boxy ducking, and make sure, yeah, so we need an animation on that one instead of no animation. Or actually, let's change it so we don't use the animation, but let's use, instead of the ducking, let's use the duck here. So now if we actually hit down, instead of animating, we just go straight to the duck, and that actually looks just fine. And we can jump, we can duck. So really what we want to do is make sure that we can go underneath this little area here. So once again, that means let's load up our room, and let's go in here and change our collision. Actually, we'll change this. Let's make these tiles go up just one, and then we need to change our collision mask to fit that. All right, let's try this one more time. Sorry, I had an eye at the first time. So, well, that's not very good, but let's see, we might be able to bring that down. Let's actually just bring that down, because our guy fits just right underneath that. Or actually, I guess what we could do, let's do this, since our tile set is just still a tiny bit off. We'll change our collision back down to the bottom, and we'll fix up our tiles here. Sorry about this. And what we're going to do is let's go to the duck. Let's check our collision mask, and I'm just going to basically half this collision mask here. So instead of using the automatic, I'm going to go to the top, and I'm just going to drag this down. Let's go to about half, so that's 32. And the same for the walking. Let's check our collision mask here. Let's go to manual and change that to 32 as well. Alright, so let's try this one more time. And walking, we can't get to it, but if I duck, I can go underneath it. Okay, perfect. This is going to work fine. So if I were to duck and I get in the middle of my collision mask here, if I let go, right now I can't move anywhere. So we don't want that to happen. So let's actually put in a couple checks here. Let's go back to our player, and let's go up to where we have our ducking mechanism. What we need to do first is check to see if we were previously ducking. So we could say if was ducking equals true. And the way that we don't duck anymore is by just letting go of the down key. Because if we hit the down key, was ducking is going to be automatically set to true. So this is always going to go in this if statement is always going to be evaluated to true once we let go of the down key. So we have to say if we were previously ducking, let's do a place meeting on the X and Y position for an object solid. And here's where the tricky part is. Now, if we just let go of the down key, we're just going to check to see where the player's origin is on the X and Y. What we actually need to do is check to see where the player's origin plus a certain amount of distance at the top is. So this is actually just going to be a couple of trials and errors. If I look at my sprites, I know that I took it down by 32, so let's start with 32. That's a good number. So we could say if the X position and Y position are minus 32, or we could actually half that, but we'll keep it as 32. Then we know that we cannot stand yet. So if we cannot stand, let's just change the state animation. Let's just keep it in the player animation state ducking. However, if we can stand, then our was ducking is now set to false. Okay, so let's try this. And like I said, the number 32 is going to be something that we're going to have to play with. So I can hit down and I can stand up here and I can stand up here. But if I come in here, let's see if I can stand up. If I get close enough. Now I am letting go of the down key and it's not letting me stand up, but I can still move left and right, and then I come out of that area. So that's just a little fix in case we have any problems, but you can see that our character is now pretty animated. He looks pretty good and he can duck through certain things, and obviously we don't get stuck in the collision masks. Now, I also know that this has been an extremely long video. I'd like to apologize as there's a couple things that didn't go as planned. However, here we are at the end of the video, so I'd like to thank Matt and Paul as well as the anonymous patrons that are choosing to show their support. It really helps a lot, and if you like what you see and want early access to these videos, source code, and helping me choose the upcoming video lessons, please check out the Patreon page. As always, please share the YouTube channel and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks once again.